Hey everybody. Today I wanted to talk about Mythic Plus in the War Within, which is what I've been spending a lot of my time in the last month doing, and not nearly enough time playing RuneScape like I should on this channel. If you've seen anything about the community reaction, a lot of people have been saying that this season of Mythic Plus is one of the worst it's ever been, and it just feels really awful. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make a video at first, but I did have some thoughts about it, especially after seeing some of the reaction to bringing Gilded Crest down from a 9 to an 8 and praising that as if that was fixing the game. I really wanted to kind of share my thoughts because I don't really think that's doing all that much to fix the problems. It is a good change, and we'll get into that. But, it just feels like there's a couple people who are asking for a system that works for them and not really a system that works for everybody. Now, to be clear, I have been doing quite a lot of keys. My main is a shaman, resto shaman. It's up to 2700 almost. But I really started to notice the problems when I started working on a couple alts. And for this, I'll be talking mainly about my experience on my Disc Priest, which is around this like 7 to 8 mark right now. To me, the big issue with Mythic Plus is the gearing progression. Now, most games that have a progression system built in find some balance of your character progression, upgrading gear, increasing your stats, versus skill progression. That's you, the player, who's actually controlling the character, improving and getting better. Some games lean much harder into the gear aspect. ARPGs such as Diablo 4 and Path of Exile are almost entirely dictated by what level of gear you have. Other games lean more into skill. Things such as the Dark Souls series or Elden Ring, where the ability to outplay with skill has led to the prominence of level 1 soul runs, completely naked, punching things to death. I'm not saying that Diablo 4 and Path of Exile don't have any skill, and I'm not saying that you can't just outgear all the bosses in Dark Souls and beat them in one shot, but I think that if you've played these games, you understand where the focus is. So why am I bringing this up? Well, basically, World of Warcraft is now Dark Souls, and you need to get good. I'm sorry, you suck, and that's why Mythic Plus sucks. I'm kidding. Don't worry. Well, kind of. Basically, World of Warcraft's character progression and the player progression have become desynced. Gear is way too easy to get, and no, don't worry, delves are not the problem here, but we'll talk about that in just a bit. It's the way that the gear tracks overlap that functionally removes the hero track entirely and pushes everyone into this gear cap plateau that can only be crossed by getting gilded crests. For the rest of this video, I'm going to make a pretty big assumption here, and that's that the majority of players, at least those who are engaged enough to do Mythic Plus, can comfortably complete a 4, but they struggle to complete a 9. I don't know what percentage of players this entails, but I think that this is a big enough group of players that I'm comfortable to talk about them. So why do I bring up these milestones? Well, once you can complete a 4, you are rewarded with Rune Crests. This is what allows champion gear, 597 item level baseline, to go all the way up to 619 item, which is tragically the equivalent of hero track 4 out of 6 gear. This means that once you get into 4s, you can get 619 gear off anything. Champion gear is absurdly easy to get. It's not just delves that are printing out free hero track gear. Mythic 2s give champion track gear. World bosses, there are renown vendors that give you champion track gear. Even in raid, this means that functionally there's no difference between a normal raid level piece of gear or a heroic piece of gear. Heroic tier really doesn't even matter that much when any normal piece that's champion can just be upgraded to its equivalent and then sent into the catalyst to turn into tier. The reason I started noticing this on my priest was because of how boring gearing became once I started to realize this. In particular, this Arakara Sack Brood, which is one of the best in slot trinkets, I think I got this from my first ever Mythic 2. It's a champion track piece of gear, and I could fully upgrade it to 619 as soon as I hit 4s. And that's it. The only thing that matters past that is, can I get gilded crests? It does not matter that this is a champion track piece of gear, because even, for example, this ring is also item level 619 at hero 4 out of 6. My next step requires gilded. I have no gear to look forward to until I get access to Gilded Crests. And the same goes for some of these tier pieces that I got. This 606 shoulders, this 606 chest. Functionally, it's identical to this 619 heroic track that I got from my vault, because until I start getting Gilded Crests, I can't go above 619, and this upgrades all the way to 619 as long as I'm willing to just toss in rune crests. This means that for pretty much anyone in this range, the only thing that matters is rune crests. They are the only currency that matters, and it only takes a 4 to farm them out and just completely power all your gear all the way up to 619. That next step, going up to Gilded, required completing 9s. Now that's been changed to requiring 8s. There are other ways of acquiring Gilded Crests, such as completing the last 2 bosses in Heroic, but that's a finite amount. You're only getting 15 per boss, or transmuting 90 Runed Crests into 15, but that is such a slow drip of Gilded Crests that I don't think it's really fair to compare that to completing 8s, which are essentially the infinite way to farm them out and to hit your cap. Just like I wouldn't consider it fair that, completing the the little maps that you get from delves is a fair way to get Gilded Crests. It's just way too slow. Nobody's reasonably doing that. The problem is that gear opens up so much at this step once you get Gilded Crests. It is actually insane. First off, you can upgrade your heroic track gear all the way up to 626 if you wanted to. In addition, that makes hero track actually matter, because if you want to upgrade to 626, you need hero track gear. You can also use Gilded Crests to craft gear, which is 636 with the Spark of Omens. Or you can, save it, and then if you do get a Mythic track piece, you can upgrade that even further. So there's a lot of really cool gearing options once you actually get Gilded Crests. There's just nothing before that. Even completing 7s, which reward the hero track gear, doesn't really matter until you're capable of also doing 8s. A hero track piece of gear is just as worthless as champion from 2s, unless you have the Gilded Crests to actually make it matter. And even then, I think it's arguable that you'd rather spend those Gilded Crests to craft something instead of upgrading it to 626, which might get replaced by a Mythic piece of gear, eventually down the line. This means that if you can complete a 4, your next step in progression was a 9. That is a massive, massive step up in difficulty. About 61% just in damage and health numbers. And even when that's brought down to an 8, that's about 47% harder than a 4. This is why I'm only half joking about this system being a skill issue, because, well, it really is. The only way for you to get over that jump in difficulty is to improve your skill. There are no meaningful rewards or tangible sense of progression along the way when you could just be spamming 4s to get all the rune crests you could need. Compare this to Shadowlands Season 1, which is the first season that I started taking Mythic Plus seriously and really trying to improve. Well, here the gear is static with a fixed item level. Each step in difficulty is also rewarding you with better gear, or you're getting a better item in your vault. So that's another reason to kind of farm that level and look forward to something at the end of the week. Each step is pushing you to improve just a little bit, and then you're rewarded for it. And that process continues as you get higher and higher. And if you do need that little extra bump in gear, you can stay at the level you're at, keep farming gear, and then push to the next one. I'm not saying that system is perfect. Replacing the same trinket over and over again with like a slightly higher item level, it's not a great feeling, but it does maintain the balance of progression between the character and the player. A big reason why playing the priest kind of shattered the mirror for me and made me realize this is because those 616 pieces from delves, which is what I think a lot of people were looking forward to, is complete your tier 8 bountiful delve, you get a 616 at the end of the week. That might as well be 600. It just does not matter. It's just more rune crests to farm to add stats. It's just saving me a couple of tier 4 dungeons to farm. That's really it. It's ironic then that a big goal of the level squish in the Mythic Plus system, going from 1 to 20, and now it's basically the equivalent of 10 to 20 with just 10 steps, was to make each step feel more meaningful and a more sensible feeling of progression, when now they really matter less than ever before. Even the score system, which could be seen as a reward in itself, feels like it was sort of forgotten with the level squish. Completing a +2 dungeon rewards about 170 points. A +7 is 270 points. That means that a full set of 2s is like 1400 score just by completing all of them once. And 2s are the first level that you do. So to me, it feels like there's been this huge like congestion of players around this like 1800 to like 2K, maybe a little bit higher now, like 2.1K. They're all kind of just like congested at the score, and it is harder than ever to tell people apart just at a glance. Sure, you could go through their Raider IO, check all the dungeons, and yes, technically the smaller marginal score is the same thing, but I just feel like at a glance, everybody just feels like they're at the same score. Everybody just feels like they're at the same item level because everybody's at 619 now that that's just a brick wall that everybody's stuck at. This means that players are having more trouble than ever self-selecting by their skill level while also pruning those first 10 levels that were in previous seasons that kind of help to group learners together. And I think this is why keys feel so variable right now. It's kind of like queuing for a League of Legends game and your teammates are randomly silver through platinum. It's just not fun for anyone when the expectations on your teammates is so different on a group to group basis. This is compounded with the issue of certain steps being far more difficult than any of the ones before them. In the past, if you could complete, say, a 14 dungeon, you could probably do a 15 dungeon as well. Numerically, it is more difficult, but that step up was gradual enough to feel challenging, but still very much in the realm of possibility. Well, that has changed in The War Within. There are some pretty steep increases in difficulties at +4s, +7s, +10s, and +12s due to the new affix structure, which is adding in new affixes at those, breakpoints. I'll focus here on Challenger's Peril, which is introduced at +7 and adds a time penalty, a greater time penalty when you die. As again, I'm assuming the majority of players here are probably comfortably doing 4s, so Tyrannical or Fortified isn't like the biggest problem. And then 10s and 12s are, in my eyes, like more late game content. That's like more pinnacle content, so I don't think it's as, impactful to the average player. These definitely have issues. I think especially at the 12 level was a pretty substantial wall as well. And there's obviously going to be people who can do 3s, but they still struggle with 4s. But again, I just want to focus on this kind of majority of the group kind of stuck in the middle. Perhaps more importantly, though, is that the 4 and the 10 marker, they do actually have significantly better rewards attached to them when you succeed and can complete them. And I actually like that system. It is a steep increase in challenge that you have to overcome, but you are given rewards that make future clears easier. I was really excited to complete my first 10 because I knew that this would give me a Mythic track piece in my vault, and that would kind of make future weeks easier. And that really motivated me when I was first playing my Shaman to challenge myself to get that 10 done. Same thing with somebody who is completing a 4 for the first time. Once you've unlocked an infinite way of farming rune crests, you've pretty much opened up the entire mid-game gear progression that's going to last you for a while. 7s don't have this. Remember, the hero track gear that you get from 7s does not matter if you don't have the ability to also get gilded crests to upgrade it past 619 anyways. So let's talk a little bit about Challenger's Peril. Now, at first, I didn't think Challenger's Peril was a big deal, and I thought that people were just kind of overstating its difficulty. After all, if you couldn't time a key because of one wipe, adding 2 or 3 minutes to the timer of the dungeon would effectively make up that time. Therefore, I felt it was an issue of tuning, not one of the affix being too hard. And especially seeing it as a replacement to previous seasons that had affixes like Sanguine or Bolstering, these could very easily rip into your timer and take 2 or 3 minutes apart. So I didn't really see a big problem with that being shifted to rewarding minimizing mistakes. Because again, if 2 or 3 minutes off one wipe is why you're not timing a key, you're probably not at the level to time that key anyways. Well, the problem is exactly that. Once you hit 7s and Challenger's Peril is introduced, sloppy play and making mistakes is a lot more impactful. So it's not that Challenger's Peril is too difficult, it's that it's too punishing. The difference between a clean run with 0 deaths and a run that went sour and racked up maybe 10 deaths, that's a whole 2.5 minutes just on the death timer alone, let alone run back, not having, teammates alive for a pull or whatnot. Like, you are losing a lot of time, and that difference between a good run and a bad run is massive. Just like the variability in players' skill level at this progression point, the variability between a good run and a bad run is much more substantial. 7s expect you to clean up your gameplay and stop making mistakes. In order to keep timing keys, you either need massively inflated DPS, or you're going to be playing on an edge where perfect play and minimizing mistakes is expected. If you're not able to just simply out damage everything, then yeah, you cannot make any more mistakes. I don't hate Challenger's Peril because I like this, I enjoy clean runs, but I also understand why this has caused players to be reluctant to invite people who haven't already shown proficiency in that level of content. More than ever before, the worst player in the group has more impact to fail the key. I don't want to invite someone to a group if they haven't done that key, because if it turns out that they're not quite ready for it, their mistakes mean so much more and they really start to press the timer. It's not just a gradual increase like it was in the past. And really, I don't even think people are wrong for doing this and being so strict with who they're picking. Score in Mythic Plus isn't like MMR in other competitive games. It doesn't go down when you lose, or in this case, when you fail to time a key. I don't mean to sound toxic or gatekeeping here, but I really do think that you are doing a disservice to somebody as well as the community at large if you're inviting them and they haven't really proven that they're at that level, but then just carrying them through by having, really good DPS that can just kind of carry their weight anyways. Good DPS can still carry a tighter timer, and that's something that, you should be aware of. You could just have very, very good DPS who are carrying all of your mistakes. Now, that person's getting a permanent score added, which makes it more difficult for them to really know where they're at. And it also makes it harder for anybody inviting them to sort people out based on their skill level. Ideally, we want people progressing with similar skill level players, and that self-sorting is really blurry right now. Even if you could get through carrying that player, what happens when they get into a group with same skill players? Now they can't time it anymore because they're all making those mistakes, and you don't have those crazy good DPS that are just going to carry them. Personally, I've already seen this with 8s, where I've been doing them to farm Gilded Crests, and I have noticed a lot of players that are nowhere near ready to do this. So as a result, my expectation kind of goes up, and now I'll only invite players who have maybe completed a 10, just to ensure no mistakes are being made, because those mistakes are quite costly. And just to be clear, I'm only really talking about, pugs with random players. I think it's totally different if you're bringing friends along, you're helping them learn, you're challenging them with harder content. I think that stuff is really good. But just in kind of the pug setting where it's all random and just completely free-for-all invites. With so much gearing progression opening up at 8s and the struggle to find groups to get there along the way, it's no wonder why so many people have found themselves really frustrated with Mythic Plus this season. Also why I think that the shift to Gilded Crests at from 9 to 8 was good, but I don't think that this comes close to solving the issues or smoothing out the progression that I've sort of talked about already. It is incredibly frustrating for me to see some people praise this change and how it's fixed the game because 9s are way too difficult and they could never get an invite. And now they're claiming, well, 8s are entirely reasonable. And if you can't do an 8 at 619 item level, you probably don't deserve the best gear, and it's a skill issue. You probably could never time these keys anyways. You just need to get better. I need you to understand how insane that feedback is. If there's a majority of players stuck in the ocean between completing 4s and 9s, moving that peg down one bit doesn't really address any of the issues I brought up in regards to no meaningful rewards within that range. It simply allows more people past the bar, and now they get to enjoy Gilded Crests. If your argument is that completing 8s at 619 item level is easy and anybody should be able to do it, someone could just as easily say that completing 9s at 619 item level is easy and anyone should be able to do it. You're now the one gatekeeping because you're on the other side of the gate. Kind of like the classic meme of everyone better than me is a sweaty tryhard and everyone worse than me is a noob. Except it's really happening here. I don't think that there's simple answers to this problem, at least not ones that could be hotfixed in the middle of the season. In my opinion, the overlap between gear tracks needs to be looked at and cut down a lot to make getting the next tier of difficulty like an actual meaningful reward. So when I get here, I'm actually excited for it. It's not just champion plus. Imagine how bizarre rating would feel if the entire heroic difficulty was just eliminated and you jump straight from normal to mythic. That is crazy. I don't think that the issue is that Mythic Plus is too hard this season. After all, it's an infinitely scaling system. Everybody defines what too hard is on their own level. It's just that the imbalance between gearing and difficulty makes it not very fun. Gearing is way too front loaded without even really having to step into a Mythic Plus. And then that player is just expected to climb their way up a mountain of levels for jack shit, with the promise of a reward only at the very top. Imagine a Legend of Zelda game which gave you the Master Sword after completing the first dungeon, and then your next upgrade is after defeating Ganon. Why even have gear at that point if upgrades are so few and far in between? What's the point? If this is what they wanted, to push the game away from gear mattering to one purely focusing on skill, they needed to be much clearer with their intention, and it's also just such a wasted opportunity, because gear upgrades do feel good once you pass the threshold of getting Gilded Crests. I really enjoyed that feeling once I got to the higher level. The game needed more of this at the intermediate levels, rather than arbitrarily deciding who's allowed to enjoy that fun. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found something you agree with, and I hope you see some of my problems. Again, I don't really do too much World of Warcraft content. I'm not planning on it too much moving forward, but I wanted to share my thoughts, and I'll be back doing League stuff. We got some cool videos cooking up for that as well. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video, and good luck, with your pug groups this season.